Dead Sky Black Sun. Chapter 2. Blood geysered in slow motion from the ragged stump of the Cenobite's neck, and Uriel pushed his spasming corpse away in disgust, backing away and wiping the sticky fluid from his face. The body remained upright, jerking and thrashing as though in the grip of a violent seizure. The Cenobite's arms flailed wildly, yet more blood flickering from his opened wrists and spattering the statuary and altar. Even as he stared in horrified fascination at the corpse's lunatic dance, Uriel felt the familiar sensation of his primary stomach flipping as the ship jumped into the treacherous currents of the warp. He gripped one of the chapel's pews as he felt a sudden dizziness, which vanished seconds later as his Lyman's ear adjusted for the sudden spatial differentiation between dimensions. The hideous corpse continued to thrash and convulse, refusing to fall despite its lack of a head, and Uriel tasted the unmistakable sensation of warp-spawned witchery on the air. The man's fellow priests wailed in terror, dropping to their knees and spilling prayers of protection and mercy from mouths open wide in horror. Some, made of sterner stuff, drew pistols from beneath their robes and aimed them at the dancing corpse. "No!" shouted Uriel, drawing his sword and leaping towards the hideous revenant. It lunged towards him, arms outstretched, but a sweeping stroke of Uriel's blade clove it from collarbone to pelvis, and the shorn halves of the men fell to the marble floor, twitching, but mercifully free of whatever monstrous animation had possessed it before. "Gilliman's blood!" swore Pausanias, backing away from the dead Cenobite and making the sign of the Aquila over his chest. "What happened to him?" "I have no idea," said Uriel, kneeling beside the corpse and wiping his blade on the Cenobite's chasuble as the lights in the chapel began flashing urgently. Wailing klaxons and ringing bells could be heard from beyond the chapel door. Uriel smoothly rose to his feet, saying, "But I have a feeling we'll find out soon." He turned and ran back to the chapel door, grabbing his bolter from the gun rack beside the entrance to the vestry. Pausanias scooped up his flamer and followed him out into the corridor, drawing up sharply as he saw what lay beyond the chapel door. Both men stood transfixed as the arched passageway before them swelled and rippled, as though in a diabolical heat haze, its dimensions swelling and distorting beyond the three known to man. "Imperator!" breathed Pausanias in terror. "The Geller field must be failing! The warp is spilling in!" "And Emperor alone knows what else," said Uriel, his dread of the unknown terrors of the warp sending a shiver of fear along his spine. Without the Geller field to protect the ship from the predatory astral and demonic creatures that swam in the haunted depths of the immaterium, all manner of foul entities would have free rein within the vessel's hulls. Ethereal horrors and shadowy phantoms that could rip men to shreds before vanishing back into the warp. "Come on!" shouted Uriel. "The gymnasia! We need to gather as many soldiers as we can before it's too late." Uriel and Pausanias lurched their way along the passageway, stumbling like a pair of drunks as they fought to hold their equilibrium in the face of this spatial insanity. Screams and roars came from ahead, but Uriel found himself unable to pinpoint exactly where ahead was as sounds echoed and distorted wildly around him. The floors and ceilings of the stone passageways seemed to run fluid, swirling as though their very fabric was being unraveled before his eyes. The sound of a tolling bell rang out, ponderously slow and dolorous one second, tinny and ringing the next. Using the wall as a guide, though it was a treacherous one, the two space marines fought their way onwards, each step bringing fresh madness to their surroundings. Uriel thought he saw a tall mountain wreathed in smoke form from the floor before it vanished and was replaced by a roiling sea of snapping mouths. But even that disappeared like a fever dream as soon as he tried to look upon it. He could say Pausanias was having similar difficulties, blinking and rubbing his eyes in disbelief. A grainy static filled Uriel's vision, and an insistent buzzing, like an approaching swarm of insects, filled his skull. He shook his head, trying to clear the distortion, and unable to comprehend things he saw before him. "How close are we?" yelled Pausanias. Uriel studied himself in a bulkhead, grateful for its transitory solidity, and shook his head again, though the moment made him want to vomit. "How can we tell? Everything changes the moment I look at it." "I think we are almost there," said Pausanias, pointing to where the passageway widened into a marble-flagged atrium. Though at present it appeared that the chamber had been inverted, its domed ceiling swirling below their feet, its dimensions skewed completely out of true. Uriel nodded and pushed himself forward, an intense and nauseous sensation of vertigo seizing him as they stumbled into the flipping atrium. Uriel's eyes told him he was crossing the floor, but he could tell that his every step found him crossing the shallow concave bowl of the inverted dome. His booted feet trod the shielded glass of the atrium's dome. That was all that lay between him and the warp. Uriel looked down from the dome, the nauseous sensation in his gut surging upwards, and he dropped to his knees, vomiting explosively across the glass. A sickly mass of bruised colors foamed and swirled beyond the glass, the very stuff of the warp itself, noxious and toxic to the eye. Its bilious malevolence went beyond its simple hideous appearance, violating some inner part of the human mind that dared not comprehend its nightmarish potential. Uriel found his eyes drawn to a loathsome stain in the warp, a vile, filthy sore of ash-stained yellow he was unable to drag his sight from. Even as he stared at it, the warp shifted, stirred into life by the mere attention and echoes of Uriel's thoughts. Vile, terrible things began shaping themselves from the foul soup of raw creation, and Uriel knew that were he to see what horrific thing would be born from its hateful depths, he would go mad. Gauntleted hands gripped him and hauled him upright, and he could feel the warp's blind, impotent rage at being denied such a morsel as his sanity. "Don't look at it! Keep your eyes closed!" shouted Pausanias, dragging Uriel over the surface of the dome. Uriel felt its insistent call, the seductions of its fecundity, and the promises of power that could be his were he but to surrender to it. His eyes ached to see the awful magnificence of the warp, but Uriel kept them screwed tightly shut, lest he betray his soul to the immaterium. Breathless and disgusted, Uriel and Pausanias clambered from the atrium and crawled away from the false seductions of the warp, the feelings of sickness diminishing the further they went. Uriel looked up, coughing, stringy, vomit-flecked spittle, and said, "Thank you, my friend." Pausanias nodded and said, "There, the entrance to the gymnasia should be through that cloister." "Aye, it should," agreed Uriel, pushing himself weakly to his feet. "Let's just hope it is still there." Uriel stumbled through the cloister and turned towards the entrance to the gymnasia. "Oh, no," he whispered as he saw what lay before them. Where he had expected to find the carven marble archway of the gymnasia, there was now a gargantuan gateway of brazen metal, bronze and laced with razor wire that led into a rectangular earthen arena which was fully a kilometer wide and twice that in length. More incredible still, there was no roof to this arena, simply a lacerated crimson sky flecked with cancerous melanoma clouds. What new madness was this? Screaming, mad and insane like the wails of the damned in torment, echoed from within and pierced Uriel's skull with lancing glass shards of pain. His stomach knotted in horrified disgust as the overpowering reek of fresh blood filled his senses. The soldiers of the 808th Macragge they had come to find were still here. But where there had once been a proud regiment of men and women ready to fight for the glory of the Emperor, there was now nothing more than the screaming, bloody shreds of those yet to die. Hundreds of soldiers writhed on the ground, splashing great gouts of blood around them as though fighting some subterranean attacker. Fleshless, bony hands reached up through the dark earth, clawing and grasping at their bodies and dragging them below the surface. Uriel ran through the gate, sword in hand, and felt his boots sink into the soft and loamy ground, crimson liquid oozing from the waterlogged earth. Bones and grinning skulls gleamed whitely through the red earth, and Uriel saw that the ground was not waterlogged at all, but flooded with fresh spilled blood. His mind reeled at the prospect. How many must have been drained of their life's blood to irrigate such a vast space so thoroughly? How many arteries had been emptied to slake the vile thirst of this dark, dark earth? Uriel was shaken from his disgust by the nearby screams of a man half submerged in the earth and weeping tears of agony. "Help me! For the love of the Emperor, help me!" he shrieked. Uriel sheathed his sword and ran over to help the man, who reached up with pleading arms. The man's gore-slick hands slid from his gauntlets, but Uriel gripped his tunic and hauled him clear of the ground. staggering back in horror as he saw that the man had been stripped of flesh below the waist, his entire lower body flensed of muscle, meat, and blood. Even as he watched, the hungry earth swallowed what remained of the dying man, unwilling to be cheated of its fleshy morsel. A sense of utter helplessness filled Uriel as he watched men and women devoured by the bloody ground, the monstrous sound of marrow being suckled from the bone echoing from the monolithic sides of his gory arena. "Blessed Emperor, no!" wailed Pausanias, fighting to save a howling woman from a similar fate. Laughing shadows ran like black mercury along the walls of the arena, a capering dance of souls that flared into the blood-red sky as the slaughter of thousands concluded. A sudden silence descended upon the arena, as the last of the bloody ground's helpless victims were dragged beneath its thirsting depths. No sooner had the last body vanished from sight, when a throaty gurgling erupted from the center of the arena, and Uriel saw a long strip of rockcrete slowly rise from the soaking ground. Dull, bloody rail tracks arose with it, running across the middle of the arena and ending at opposite walls. The hateful silence was broken by a sibilant moaning, as of 1,000 voices trapped in a nightmare they know they will never wake from. Holy Emperor, protect us from evil. Grant us the strength of spirit and body to fight your enemies and smite them with your blessing, prayed Pausanias. Too late, whispered Uriel, drawing his sword and standing ready to fight whatever new monstrosity the warp might unleash. We failed. You have not yet begun. Both Uriel and Pausanias spun, searching for the source of the voice. Did you hear that? Asked Uriel. Aye, nodded Pausanias. I think so, but it felt as though it was inside my head. Something terrible is coming, Uriel. I know, but whatever comes, we will fight it with courage and honor. Courage and honor, agreed Pausanias, firing the igniters on the nozzle of his flamer. Let's go, said Uriel grimly, nodding towards the dripping platform in the center of the arena. Whatever is coming, we'll meet it head on. Pausanias followed his former captain as they made their way across the hideously squelching ground towards the platform. As they mounted its steps, the source of the sibilant moaning was finally revealed. Each sleeper laid between the rail tracks was a jigsaw of bodies and limbs, writhing in agony and knotted together by some dark sorcery. They screamed in lunatic delirium, their faces piteous and heartbreaking. Though he knew none of the faces, the cast of their features told Uriel that they were the stock of Ultramar, and that the souls of those consumed by this abominable place were suffering still. Eyes and mouths churning in the fluid matter of each sleeper gave anguished voice to their suffering before being forced from form to formlessness, that another soul might vent its endless purgatory. Uriel's hatred swelled within him at such horror, and he closed his eyes.
Solitary crystals of alternate existences clash and jangle, detaching from the walls of one plane and shifting their position to resonate at a different frequency. Echoes in time allow the planes to shift and change, altering the angles of reality to allow the dimensions to unlock, dancing in a ballet of all possibilities.
Then opened them, as he felt a sickening vibration deep in his bones, and a restlessness ripple through the air. The jagged stumps of bone jutting through the ground retreated into its sanguineous depths, and the moaning sleepers wept with renewed anguish. Where the rail tracks vanished into the walls of this vast courtyard, streamers of multicolored matter were oozing from the stonework. Rippling spirals of reflective light coiled from the mortar, twisting the image behind like a warped lens. The walls seemed to stretch as though being sucked into an unseen vortex behind, until there was nothing left but a rippling veil of impenetrable darkness, a tunnel into madness ringed with screaming skulls sent out to die.
Warped realms of universes and lifetimes distant flew together, joining all points in time on the bronze blood tracks, on a journey that leads everywhere and begins new. The Umphalos demonium pushes itself from nothingness to force, sneaking from its demonic womb and leaving nothing but barren defilement and death in its wake.
And the Umphalos demonium came. Though the Cenobite had raved of the might and power of the Umphalos demonium's evil, They had been but the merest hints of the thing's diabolical majesty, roaring from the newly formed tunnel mouth like a brazen juggernaut of the end times. The Omphalos demonium shrieked along the blood tracks towards the horrified space marines. Vast bone pistons drove it forward, iron and steel flanks heaving with immaterial energies. Bloody stream leaked from every demented skull-faceted rivet as wheels of tortured souls ground the tracks beneath it to feast on the oozing blood of the dead earth. Deep within its insane structure, it might have once resembled an ancient steam-driven locomotive, but unknown forces and warped energies had transformed it into something else entirely. The thunder of its arrival could be felt by senses beyond the pitiful five known to humankind, echoing through the planes that existed and intersected beyond the veil of reality. Behind it came a tender of dark iron and a juddering procession of boxcars, their timbers stained with eons of blood and ordure. Uriel knew that without knowing that millions had been carried to their deaths in these hellish containers, carried to whatever loathsome destination its horrifying machine desired before finally being exterminated. The vast Daemon engine slowed, the sleepers driven beyond sound in their torment as the towering machine halted at the edge of the platform. Uriel thought he heard booming laughter and the grinding squeal of warped timber doors sliding open on runners rusted with gore. Gusts of blood-laced steam hissed from the armored hide of the Omphalos demonium, and malevolent laughter rippled through them as they writhed on evil business of their own. Each tendril thickened and became more solid as they wormed towards the space marines, and Uriel said, "Stand ready." The tendrils of smoke vanished without warning, and in their place stood 8 figures, each wearing a featureless gray boiler suit and knee-high boots with rusted shackles along the shins. Each carried a fearsome array of knives, hooks, and saws on their leather belts. Their faces were human in proportion only, flensed of the disguise of skin and glistening with revealed musculature. Crude stitches crisscrossed their skulls, and when they turned their heads, as though hunting by scent, Uriel saw they were utterly featureless save for distended and fanged mouths. They had no eyes, nose, or ears, only discolored swellings that bulged and rippled beneath their fleshless skulls. "Demons!" shouted Uriel. "Foul abominations! Come forth and die on my blade!" A daemon's patchwork face swung towards him, tumorous tissue in its neck bulging with horrid appetite. None of the foul creatures moved, content merely to watch the 2 space marines as a billowing cloud of steam vented from the side of the vast Daemon engine. With a clang of locks disengaging, a thick iron door squealed open, and a gigantic figure stepped onto the platform. Standing head and shoulders above them, the giant wore a clanking mechanical suit of riveted iron plates and thick sheets of melted vulcanized rubber. Over its rusted armor it wore a charred apron, and a crown of blackened horns sprouted from a conical helmet with a raised visor. For all its crude fabrication and disrepair, Uriel recognized the armor as impossibly ancient power armor, such as had been worn by warriors of legend many thousands of years ago. The stench of scorched meat enfolded it, together with a crackling sensation of depraved evil and unquenchable rage. One shoulder guard was studded with star-shaped rivets, the other emblazoned with a symbol of ancient malice that both ultramarines recalled from the depths of righteous anger instilled in them by Chaplain Clausel's daily litanies of hate. A grinning, iron-visored skull that once was the heraldry of a legion that had fought for the Emperor in hallowed antiquity, but was now a symbol of unending bitterness and hatred. It was a symbol that now belonged to the most lethal foes of the Imperium, warriors of unutterable evil and malice, the Chaos Space Marines.
"Iron warriors,"
hissed Uriel.
"the betrayers of Istvan,"
growled Pausanias. The figure carried a long, iron-hafted billhook, the broad, curved blade rusted and pitted with reddish-brown stains. A pair of burning yellow eyes, like sickly, dying suns, shone from beneath the helmet, as the figure took a heavy step towards them, the skinless demons moving to stand behind it.
"Dead morsels feed the new fire. Blood is sucked by the faceless sarcomata, and flesh of man will come with me,"
said the figure. its voice like rusted metal on their skulls. It gripped its enormous billhook in one blackened, burned hand and beckoned them impatiently towards the hissing demon engine with the other.
Come,
Boomed the giant.
I have purpose for you. Obey me, or the slaughterman turn you into dead morsels. I am the Amphalos demonium, and my will drives this suit of flesh, and it will turn you into dead morsels. Now come!
Uriel felt sickened even being near this thing of chaos. Could it really believe that they would willingly have truck with such evil? The featureless demons which Uriel guessed were the Sarcomata, the Amphalos demonian spoke of, spread out on the platform, unhooking long, serrated knives from their belts. "Courage and honor!" yelled Uriel, leaping towards the nearest of the Sarcomata and stabbing for its belly. His sword passed straight through the creature, its form transforming into a cackling pillar of red steam. He pulled up in surprise, grunting in pain as the beast's form coalesced beside him, and its blade slashed across his cheek. Another darted in, its rusty blade stabbing into his neck. He twisted free of the weapon before it could penetrate more than a centimeter, and swung at his new attacker. Once again his assailant flashed to steam before his blow could land, and Uriel found himself off balance as another knife blade laid his cheek open to the bone. "Burn, chaos, filth!" roared Pausanias, and sprayed a blazing gout of promethium at the giant iron warrior. The volatile chemical flames licked hungrily at the giant, but no sooner had the fire taken than it guttered and died. The creature's booming laughter echoed from the sides of the arena.
I have been prisoner in flames for eons, and live flesh thinks it can burn me.
Pausanias slung his flamer and reached for his pistol, but with a speed that belied its ungainly form, the chaos creature stepped forward, wrapping its blackened fingers around Pausanias' throat and hauling him from his feet. Uriel slashed at the Sarcomata as they surrounded him, each thrust and sweep of his sword hitting nothing but chuckling tendrils of steam that vanished only to reappear elsewhere to cut him. Clotted blood caked his face, and he knew that he could not fight such foes for much longer. He saw the giant in the rusted armor lift Pausanias from his feet and hurl him through the iron door the Omphalos demonium had first stepped from, and surged towards the chaos creature. He could not fight foes that could disappear at will, but he swore that this traitor from the elder days would die by his hand. He swung his sword towards the iron warrior, the blade wreathed in pellucid flames able to cut through armor and flesh with equal ease. The sword struck his enemy full square on the chest, but the blade simply clanged from the heavy iron plates of his armor. Uriel was amazed, but drew his arm back to attack again. Before he could strike, the iron warrior's fist slammed into his face, sending him sprawling across the platform. He fought to regain his senses, but the Sarcomata surrounded him, their blackened fingers reaching hungrily for him. Their touch felt like rotted meat, wriggling with the suggestion of maggots and freshly hatched larvae. Their dead skin masks were centimeters from his face, their breath like a furnace of cadavers. They moved their undulating faces around his as though tasting his scent, their fearsome strength pinning him to the ground.
The Sarcomata favor you, Ultramarine,
Laughed the giant, striding across the platform towards him.
They are corruption of spirit given form and purpose. Perhaps they sense a certain kinship.
Uriel waited for death as one of the Sarcomata lowered its mouth to his bared neck. But the Omphalos demonium had greater purpose for him than mere murder, and roared in impatience. The skinless demons hissed in submission, hauling Uriel from the platform and carrying him towards the iron door of the massive demon engine. Burning air and the stench of cooked meat gusted from within, and as he was carried inside, Uriel knew that they were truly damned.